Hello, welcome to our channel, where we set out to explore wonderful great works of literature.
While dressed in elegant clothing, because why the hell not?
And also because they told us to. So let's get into this one then. So today we're going to be discussing the...
Maybe you've already guessed it.
1984, yeah, judging by our background, our telescreen in the back. This was a very timely book to read. Also very prescient and also very scary and disturbing to read all at the same time. Those are all negative qualities, but it's kind of amazing that this book was actually written, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. When it was, right?
Yeah, how accurate.
Do you want to give a bit of a background on George Orwell?
Yeah, sure. So he was born in 1903 in India, where his father worked for the civil service. Family moved to England in 1907. This book, well, he died in 1950, but this one was written in 1949.
1949, and it's amazing how applicable a lot of what he is saying is today.
Yeah, especially, you know, with big tech and surveillance, I guess surveillance, global surveillance and national surveillance and all the things that are happening around regarding privacy and even sort of with the experiments of messing with reality. I think most people have an ordinary sense of their own perceptions and their own where they are in the world, and are able to kind of position themselves with their own historical understanding, whether true or accurate or inaccurate. But people have there was a sort of a consensus in terms of like generally what we accept as true and what we accept as false. Yeah. And there's always divergence in terms of people's opinions about things, of course, right? So people's perceptions of reality are always different. But this one kind of distills it down to the party line. And, you know, down to a select, you know, whether it's a dictator or
tyranny.
Yeah, or authoritarian regime, whatever the case is, they are the ones who, through almost like a top-down process, kind of dictate what is right and what is wrong. And it's just eerie because it's very, like, many of the things that you actually see going on in today's world, like the whole... there was like a 2 + 2 = 5 thing by
and this is repeated through.
And this was, but I mean, like, I'm talking about someone who actually like was on social media insisting, a mathematician or someone who was insisting of that.
Well, there's so much that's applicable today. And
yeah.
I kind of don't want to do what this book says is the wrong thing to do, which is not allow you to reflect and think for yourself, right? So I think let's try not to tell them what we thought about it today, and let's just read some components of it and think about
she's got some bookmarks there.
Yeah, so you can see we've kind of, as we were going through, I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I think I'll just read a couple parts of it, and I think after you hear this, you'll either be too afraid to pick up this book or be so tempted you won't be able to not pick it up.
Like, I think people can very much draw their own conclusions from their own perceptions, even reading the book with an open mind, and realizing that these are, what he's essentially outlined are strategies, not so much from one political faction really, but these are generalized strategies that can be incorporated regardless of what your political persuasion is, provided it has an authoritarian, tyrannical bent to it. So when you're really trying to control people's thoughts and their behaviors, it kind of gets to the most fundamental aspect of what is a human experience and where we derive our experiences from. And it's all from the mind. So much is from the mind. And if only you can control what goes in the mind, what language is used to express your thoughts, what thoughts you're allowed to have, it will dictate so much downstream that effectively you can have a controllable population through propaganda and through certain thought police measures and other restrictions.
This is supposed to be portraying a dictatorship or a loss of freedom. even in today's world, even if we come from a country that maybe isn't a dictatorship, there's still interesting things that you can glean from it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read, this one's going to be a bit longer, and then I'm going to pass it off to you to read the next one. This is a half of a page where it's a book that they're reading on kind of the development of how Ingsoc came to be. Ingsoc, which is it's Oceania is the country, but Ingsoc is kind of, I guess, the dictatorship, right?
Yeah, the party.
Right? The party, yeah. So the aims of these three groups are entirely inconcealable. The aim of the high is to remain where they are. The aim of the middle is to change places with the high. The aim of the low, when they have an aim, for it is an abiding characteristic of the low that they are too much crushed by drudgery to be more than intermittently conscious of anything outside their daily lives, is to abolish all distinctions and create a society in which all men shall be equal. Thus, throughout history, a struggle which is the same in its main outlines recurs over and over again. For long periods, the high seem to be securely in power, but sooner or later there always comes a moment when they lose either the belief in themselves or their capacity to govern efficiently, or both. They are then overthrown by the middle, who enlists the low on their side by pretending to them that they are fighting for their liberty and justice. As soon as they have reached their objective, the middle thrusts the low back into their old position of servitude, and themselves become the high. Presently, a new middle group splits off from one of the other groups, or from both of them, and the struggle begins over again. Of the three groups, only the low are never even temporarily successful in achieving their aims. It would be an exaggeration to say that throughout history there has been no progress of material kind. Even today, in a period of decline, the average human being is physically better off than he was a few centuries ago, but no advance in wealth, no softening of manners, no reform or revolution has ever brought human equality a millimeter nearer. From the point of view of the low, no historic change has ever meant much more than a change in the name of their masters. To arrest progress and freeze history at a chosen moment, the familiar pendulum swing was to happen once more and then stop. As usual, the high were to be turned out by the middle, who were then become the high, but this time, by conscious strategy, the high would be able to maintain their position permanently. The new doctrine arose partly because of the accumulation of historical knowledge and the growth of the historical sense, which had hardly existed before the 19th century. The cyclical movement of history was now intelligible, or appeared to be so, and if it wasn't intelligible, then it was alterable. But the principal underlying cause was that, as early as the beginning of the 20th century, human equality had become technically possible.
Outlines of the world which would emerge from the prevailing chaos had long been obvious. What kind of people would control this world had been equally obvious. The new aristocracy was made up for the most part of bureaucrats, scientists, technicians, trade union organizers, publicity experts, sociologists, teachers, journalists, and professional politicians. These people, whose origins lay in the salaried middle class and the upper grades of the working class, had been shaped and brought together by the barren world of monopoly industry and centralized government.
Obviously, you can kind of tell by the end they're referring to how a society is broken down, and in this case they're referring to how the current leadership kind of came into power and how they came to conquer and divide again the society.
Like he mentions in the book, like history stood still because like history ceased to be moving forward in any sort of fashion. It was just kind of like frozen in place essentially.
And stopped the reflection of the cyclical pattern of history.
Yeah, like they figured out how to prevent that pattern from recurring in a sense. And one of the ways they did that is actually through the control of, obviously, like the history books, but also the language in which people can express themselves. And like you were saying, like the dictionaries would come out in different editions, and every time a new edition comes out, it's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. They're using fewer and fewer words.
Yeah, they would just put anti in front of things. So if it was like, rather than having a negative to a word, rather than it being like happy and then depressed, it would be anti-happy.
Or not, or non-happy.
They just put anti in front of everything. Yeah. Anti-happy.
Yeah.
And so hence why it's anti-sex Club, but you probably can't read
Sex
it.
League.
I keep saying club. That sounds so weird.
Anti-sex club.
Anti-sex league. Sorry.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this part, it was like, I think it was saying like,
I have sex club on my brain.
Instead of the energy being sort of directed towards sexual act, it's kind of like has to be redirected towards hate week, and then like the sense of like aggression and war, battle cries against sort of the like, Oceania's enemies and stuff, right? So what is it? So tell me, what is it about the book that you found fascinating or enjoyable, or not maybe enjoyable? Why does this book stand
the
out?
end was disturbing for sure, but it had to be that way. It had to be for every other word on each page to be understood and really appreciated.
Driven home.
Yeah.
I found the last chapter or so incredibly disturbing. I even found it was almost like painful to actually like read it out and to hear you reading it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there was some pretty disturbing torture scenes, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if those are still being used for brainwashing today. Some of the tactics seemed well researched, and yeah, it's highly disturbing.
Yeah, I kind of didn't expect, to be honest, I didn't expect it to take that turn. Like, I'm embarrassed to say this was the first time I've actually read 1984. A lot of people had to read it in their curriculum in high school and middle school. But for some reason we decided we weren't reading this one. We decided to pick something else. But a lot of people, graduate from high school having already read this. Yeah. And I think it's worth, if you've read it already at a younger age, I think it's definitely worth a reread.
Reread it from your adult lens.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really remember it. And
I think it's also, I was just going to say, I do think it's important to be a little bit impartial and slightly dispassionate, because in this age of like political furor and like, polarization, it's very easy to simply blame your opponents and say, aha, this is exactly what the other side is doing.
So on that note, here's a perfect reading of it. As compared with their opposite numbers in past ages, they were less avaricious, less tempted by luxury, hungrier for pure power, and above all, more conscious of what they were doing and more intent on crushing opposition. This last difference was cardinal. By comparison with that existing today, all the tyrannies of the past were half-hearted and inefficient. The ruling groups were always infected to some extent by liberal ideas, and were content to leave loose ends everywhere, to regard only the overt act, and to be uninterested in what their subjects were thinking. Even the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages was tolerant by modern standards. Part of the reason for this was that in the past no government had the power to keep its citizens under constant surveillance. The invention of the print, however, made it easier to manipulate public opinion, and the film and the radio carried this process further. With the development of television and the technical advance which made it possible to receive and transmit simultaneously on the same instrument, private life came to an end. Yeah. And I'll just leave it there. Yeah,
and I think that's actually like a very key consideration.
Message, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's not even about really stifling your opponents or suppressing your opponents. It's absolute destruction of your entire opponent.
Exactly. And no empathy, not even considering what the other side might see.
Right. And like they say, like a lot of even like political, the choices obviously it's experiential as well, like, what political persuasion you would be, but a lot of it's temperamental. It's your disposition you're born with or raised in or whatever the case might be, but a lot of people are born with certain temperaments that dictates, how they perceive the world. And politics is just very much downstream from everything else, despite what a lot of people think, that they think it's the primacy of politics. It's actually quite downstream from your worldview, your cosmological worldview, your place in the cosmos, or your meaning in your life. Like, it's all like, politics is where kind of like the inner world of subjective inner world and the outer world of the external collide, where you have an opportunity to present your will and force it upon the external environment. And that's a very hotly contested arena, right?
Well, it makes me think of like the black-white thinking that they talk about, right, in this book, and what often happens in politics. It's like, if you are this, you are this. Like, even this is happening a lot in politics. If you are from this certain group of people, then you will vote this. If you are from this group of people, you will vote this. That very like black-white thinking.
Yeah. And again, the world is nuanced. The world is nuanced.
Yeah.
Reality is nuanced.
And another quote from the black-white kind of philosophy. But since in reality the Big Brother is not omnipotent and the party is not infallible, there is need for an unwearying moment-to-moment flexibility in the treatment of facts. The key word here is black-white. Like so many newspeak words, the word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white, in contradiction of the plain facts. Applied to a party member, it means a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this. But it means also that the ability to believe that black is white, and more, to know that black is white, and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. This demands a continuous alteration of the past, made possible by the system of thought which really embraces all the rest, and which is known in Newspeak as doublethink, exactly what you were going into.
Yeah. I think it's rather, what I find very interesting and scary and kind of a little bit despairing is when you can actually go back into history and rewrite it, or make things disappear. And you know, interesting enough, it's not a new thing. This isn't a new occurrence phenomenon.
Funny that you should say this because of this.
No, but
I'm cutting you off because I'm trying to get I'm trying to get them to reflect. Anyway, the alteration of the past is necessary for two reasons, one of which is subsidiary and, so to speak, precautionary. Do you want to read that?
No, you read it.
The subsidiary reason is that the party member, like the proletarian, tolerates present-day conditions partially because he has no standards of comparison. He must be cut off from the past, just as he must be cut off from foreign countries, because it is necessary for him to believe that he is better off than his ancestors, and that the average level of material comfort is constantly rising. But by far the most important reason for readjustment of the past is the need to safeguard the infallibility of the party. It is not merely that speeches, statistics, and records of every kind must be constantly brought up to date in order to show that the prediction of the party were in all cases right. It is also that no changes in doctrine or in political alignment can ever be admitted.
Yeah. It also goes to show, it's just like, you know, what's happening is that, you know, people are perceiving, like, you know, you have an opinion based on an event, but when people are seeing two separate events, they're two sets of facts that people are being presented with, that's a complete break in reality. And that means two people are actually experiencing two different realities, two different worlds altogether. And that's irreconcilable. There isn't any room for negotiation there if two people are being fed. And, you know, information isn't manipulated in many ways, right? In terms of how it's presented, what angle it takes. And there, you know, it's not exactly a very objective science. But you were saying something about Tristan in the classics. It was kind of like a shout out to him.
Well, it was interesting because it's like when you decrease your vocabulary, you have less words to describe your reality.
Yeah.
And so then it makes you not even have the capacity to reflect as well, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the language to explain yourself, then you don't have the same reflective capacity. And it just made me think of what Tristan in the classics, he said on his panel. That's our dog trying to break in and also creep us out. When he said that, you know, you become more empathetic when you read, because you can enter into someone else's perspective through not even just someone else's, like multiple people's perspective, but you also gain vocabulary, and through gaining vocabulary you are better able to express yourself. So I thought that was very much applicable to in this book for not only from the perspective of characters and gaining more vocabulary, but it literally describes what would happen if you reduced your vocabulary down substantially. Maybe we should let our dog in.
Let the hound in.
There he is. There's the real star.
He came on right on time. Right on time.
Thank you.
Okay. So
is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, nothing else.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, you should read it.
So we'll rate it, boys. Should we rate it, gentlemen? Okay.
Okay. I rated 4.2 out of 5. I think it was a really good book.
I love this book. I'm gonna rate it. Well, love is not the right word. Maybe anti-love.
Anti-love the book.
Anti-love the book. 4.8 out of 5 for me.
So yeah, I guess if they want to leave their comments or your thoughts on the book, if you've read it. We
already know your thoughts, so.
Yeah, so Big Brother already knows.
Yes, and so does Rupert.
Yes, Rupert is Big Brother.
He knows all.
Okay, well anyway, thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.